Today, thank you for joining us. We are talking about the freedom factor, how understanding finances can totally change your life, and how, quite frankly, the lack of understanding finances and the fear of finances kind of keep you stuck where you are. So, logistically, we are going to open up the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and go directly in the chat. First, we're going to start with, for those of you who have been with me in a webinar before, you know two things about me. First, that this is really technically a workshop and we want you to show up and be ready to kind of answer some questions and be here for yourself. And secondly, that I want you to be super selfish with your time. To do that, I want you to get very specific on what you want to get out of this today. Think about why it is that you signed up for this in the first place and what it is that you specifically want to get out of this. Because that will help you identify if we haven't hit it. You can ask a question at the end. You can get very specific about what it is that you're looking for. But first, I want to tell you a story. So this is a beautiful picture of me in 2017. I look a little bit different now. It's 2025. But when I decided to quit my job at a Medicaid MCO, I did it because I was unhappy, right? So I had survived public humiliation when the Maryland Health Benefit Exchange had failed. I had survived a brain tumor. And here I was at this Medicaid MCO, not all that happy. And I couldn't figure out why I was still working there, why I still had to prove to myself that I could do it, why I cared about getting up every day at 7:30 and driving to work when I knew the most important thing to me was putting my daughter on the bus. Why was I stuck? Well, the short answer is money. Even though I had already invested myself to become an executive coach, I was worried about how much money we were going to have, right? How much money could my coaching business make? I was the breadwinner, and I had been the breadwinner for the majority of my marriage to my husband. And so I was super worried that how was it that I was going to help the family live in the accustomed that we've been, accustomed, living in the way that we've been accustomed to. So it was a huge fear. I will tell you that at some point that fear was overtaken by the sadness and the pain that I was in of actually going to work every day because I looked at my husband and I said, I can't understand why I'm still doing this. And he said, can't you just hang out for 2 more years? And I said, what if I'm not alive in 2 years? Right? This is what the brain tumor taught me. Nobody is promised tomorrow. And so this is why I finally made that decision to move. But fast forward 6 months into my executive coaching business, and I get a phone call from a large organization out in California. And they say, we are not going to have a conversation with anybody else until you tell us that you don't want this job. It was a job to run $1 billion business in an industry that I knew, doing exactly what I have always been working towards. I mean, it was like my dream job. Or was it? Right? When I think about it, when I think about why I left that Medicaid MCO to begin with, it was to be able to put my daughter on the bus, right? This job on paper was bigger, better, faster, more. But really, what it was for me was security. It was financial security. That's the only thing that I saw at that moment, financial security. What I forgot was that I was looking for financial freedom. So let me show you what I have been able to do over the past 7 years since I opened my executive coaching firm. I have more time, I have more energy, I have more space to be with the ones that I love. And it's because I recognized that freedom for me was more important than the security. Now, I did have a very interesting conversation with my husband to get to that point where he was on board with me on that security piece, but it was understanding that for me, the value of freedom was more important than the value of security. And that's what has allowed me to get to where I am today. And that's why I'm here to help people like you figure out, like, where are you stuck? And where's that financial piece that may be keeping you where you're stuck today? What is that fear? What are the mistakes that people make? And how do you move beyond that? So now I'm going to turn it over to Phil for him to introduce himself.
Sure. Thanks, Becca. And thank you both. Thank you all for coming. My story for why I do what I do today really goes back to childhood, growing up in my house It was the typical family model. My father was responsible for the finances. My mother was responsible for taking care of my sister and I. But here's the thing, when it came to managing finances, my father wasn't good at it at all.
Hmm.
We had unpaid bills, we had no credit, we had no savings. When I was old enough to drive, I remember going to the local utility to pay pay them so that our services could be turned back on because they'd been turned off for failure to pay. When it was time for me to go to college, I was told, go anywhere you want. So I visited a bunch of schools and I had choices, and I chose to go to Duke. I went there, the campus was magnificent, and I wanted to be a doctor. And I thought going to Duke gave me my best chance to become a doctor. And I was going to be a psychology major. My father didn't pay. I did a lot of things to stay in school. After my junior year, though, I had met with the president of the university. That gave me another probably year and a half, the things that came out of that. But I owed the school enough money at the end of my junior year that we agreed that I would leave school. And once I paid off what I owed, I could come back. So I left school. I ended up moving out to Tucson because it was toxic at home. I went out there to visit. I really liked it. I met some people that I liked, and I decided to move across the country. When it was time to go back to school, I decided that I probably wasn't going to get into medical school because all that financial stuff weighing on me made it hard for me to do as well as I would have liked. So I wanted to go and study accounting. And Duke doesn't offer accounting degrees, so going back there wasn't the right thing. So I applied to University of Arizona and I applied to Rutgers, and I thought that I would get a better job coming out of Rutgers. So I came back home and I went to Rutgers and I graduated with my accounting degree. While all that was happening, my mother went back to school and she became an occupational therapist and ultimately started her own business. And I know that the reason that she did that was because she wanted to be able to be strong enough and in position that she could leave my father and be on her own. When I finished school, I did move back home because I had gotten through school by paying for tuition and rent with credit card checks because I still didn't have as much money as I needed, but that was the only way that I could do it. And I knew I had debt and I wanted to pay it off. One day I came home and I opened up the mail, went and got the mail, and there were bills in the mail that had my name on them. These were credit card bills, but there's only one problem. They weren't mine. My father had forged my name to open up credit cards so that he could get credit because he couldn't get credit. I reached out to the credit card companies. One of them sent me a copy of the application. I knew the signature was his. And that was when I went to confront him because I knew that he couldn't deny it because I had the evidence. He did admit what he did. I had the companies take all those cards out of my name, but they put them into his because he'd been paying enough to keep from getting in trouble. A little bit after that, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And that's when we found out how bad the financial situation at home really was. Those credit cards were now all in collection. The mortgage rate on my parents' house was way higher than it should have been at the time, and they were in danger of being foreclosed on. They ultimately had to move, sell the house while my mother was undergoing treatment. And my mother, like I said, she asked me to help. I did what I could, but my mother didn't make it. 18 months after her diagnosis, her breast cancer had metastasized to her brain, and she passed away. And so now I view the work that I do as trying to help other women avoid the kind of things that my mother experienced. And so that's kind of my why. And so you can see here that picture in the middle, that's from my bar mitzvah. That's my mother and I dancing at my bar mitzvah party. And then in the bottom left, that's my wife Diane and I. And then we have 4 kids. And so that's a picture of the 4 of us from, I think that was on Long Island. We were at a family event. But anyway, that's really why I do what I do. It's to try to help avoid, other women avoid the kind of things my mother went through. So that's why I do this.
And Phil, uh, I've heard pieces of that story before, but not the entire story before. And that ties directly into what we're going to talk about stories about money and how that story can impact you. So thank you for sharing. So here's what we know. We, as an executive, I as an executive coach, and Phil as a financial planner and a life planner, we know that if you're in a position of change, if you're thinking about some sort of change, you're thinking about some transition, money is somehow ingrained in that change, and it's usually in a negative way. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what that relationship is with money. We're going to talk about the common myths, fears, and mistakes about money. And we're going to talk about where those come from and figure out how to get away from them. And then also at the end, we're going to do a mindset shift. This is the exercise that you're going to do to help you change your future. So here's again, from a coach's perspective, money, or really the fear of not having money, is a dream killer. So many people that I talk to, right? It's, I can't because of money. I can't this because of money. You know what? It's also an excuse. I can tell you with 100% certainty that at some point somebody's hiding behind the fear of not having money to keep from making a decision that they really want to make, or going after the dream that they really want to dream. Go back to my story where it was like I was stuck at that Medicaid MCO because I was afraid of not having the money to support my family. So let me talk a little bit about the process that I see. This is a process that I see in the hundreds of multiple hundreds of people that I coach. When people are going through change, you go through four phases of change. We're actually going to talk today about just that decision point. If you look at three-quarters of the way up, there's a decision point right there. And that's the decision point where after you've gone through this unfortunate awareness, you're unfortunately aware that you are not where you want to be. Then you go through some stages of change. And at some point, you have to make a decision about whether or not you're going to make that jump, that whether or not you're going to decide to be that new person, to take that new job, to go back to school, to do whatever it is. And that's that financial piece. And that's where most people get stuck. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let me talk about the common myths and mistakes that I see people make. So there are two common myths that I hear people say. One is, I need the money I'm making right now to live the life I want to live. Or it's some version of this. I can't make a change because of my financial situation, right? There's always this tie to I have to keep the financial situation that I'm in right now. That's a myth. And then what happens is, here are the common mistakes people make, right? Common mistake is people assume they know their financial situation. I cannot tell you how many CEOs I've spoken to who don't actually know their true financial situation because they don't have a financial planner. They've never really taken a look at it. I've got somebody who says, when I asked her, how she manages her money, and her response was benign neglect, right? So I think people assume, right? And we're going to get into where this comes from and what the core belief underneath that is. People assume the worst. So then people wait too long before talking to a professional. If you're a business owner and you're thinking about selling your business, the first thing that you need to do is talk to a financial professional who can help you understand how much money is tied up in your business, how much money you need out of your business. If the next thing you want to do is go back to school or change jobs or retire, whatever it is, whenever you're making a change, the number one thing you need to do right away is talk to a financial professional who can help you decide whether or not you can make the decision. Because the most important thing is you tell them what you want to do, they help you make it happen, right? I joke with my clients, I'm like, if you haven't spoken to a financial planner, you can't tell me that you're worried about your finances. If your financial planner tells it's time to worry about your finances, then it's okay to worry. But you can't worry until somebody else tells you. And so the number one mistake people make then is that it becomes this excuse, right? It's an easy thing to hide behind. Oh, I can't make the change because I don't have the money. When really it's the inner work. It's the who am I going to be? What am I going to tell my family? What if I fail? Those are the things that are the real issues about why you're not making the change. But it's really easy to hide behind the tangible piece of money. So those are the myths and mistakes that I personally see. I want to tell you about a client. So Jane is a client of mine, and actually, she's also partially a client of Phil's. She's had some conversation with Phil. So she, for the life of our engagement, she and I have been together for 8 years, and for those 8 years, it has been a mantra of hers. Have to keep working. She owns her own business. I have to keep working. I don't have enough money. I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I can't possibly sell my business. I'm too scared to sell my business. But ultimately, she didn't actually know if that was true, right? She hadn't actually had a conversation with anybody. She just assumed. Meanwhile, her husband is a former CEO and on a board, a paid board. Like he had been telling her for years, everything's totally fine. You can do what you want. But she refused to believe him until she had a conversation with a financial planner. That financial planner looked at everything she had and said, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. Why is it that you feel like you're so concerned about this? Because I can tell you right now that you are set for your retirement. Phil, when you talked to her, what was her conversation?
She's very a lot of uncertainty, not knowing. Like one of the things that I asked her was, what's her biggest concern? And the biggest concern centers around not knowing if she has enough and not knowing what she can do. But then when you ask her, so how does she treat her money now? The answer is, I do it myself. But she just said that her biggest fear was not understanding or not knowing. So how can you do it yourself? But that's what people do because they get afraid to ask
Right,
for help.
right. So let's get into this a little bit. Where does this come from? So we can ask one simple question, and this is where I want you to get out and put your thinking caps on for yourself. Thinking caps. That's such an old saying. Um, what is your story around money? What was your story around money when you were growing up? Because here's what we know. Parental modeling is one of the key factors of how we view money. Did your parents have it? Did they spend it? How did they talk about it? How did they talk about others who had it or didn't have it? Were there financial arguments in your house? One step deeper. Did you have an allowance? If you did have an allowance, did you have to earn it? Did they educate you about money? These are all things from a an upbringing perspective that create a story for you around money. Phil, what was your story around money when you were growing up?
Well, I told you part of it,
Right.
but
If you were put it in one sentence, what would you say
it was,
is if somebody said, what do you think about money? What would be the one sentence that you would say?
it was autocratic. My mother had no say. My father made all the decisions, but like I said, he didn't know what he was doing. And my mother was kind of stuck. Like my father gave my mother an allowance every week of $20.
Right.
That was all she had. That was what she was supposed to spend until she worked. And that
So
was
for
it.
you, money, the story of money is it's autocratic and dad was in charge.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I want everybody to just spend just 30 seconds to really think about this for yourself. What was it? What was your story? I know whether Phil, what's your other question? There's no way, another way to ask this question. What's the question that you ask?
I like to ask, what's your first money memory?
What's your
And
first money memory?
like I'll share mine. So when I was growing up, I remember on Saturdays, my friend and I would go to the movies. The movie's really cheap, and so we get money for the movie, the ticket, and then we have money to buy some type of candy or something else. But we didn't get that much, and movie theater prices are always expensive. So there was actually a grocery store
Hmm.
located in the same little strip mall that the movie theater was in that we would go to. And we would go to the grocery store and buy candy there that we could take and we would, put it in our pocket or something and take it into the movie because that way we could actually get something because we didn't have that much. So I guess the idea to me was that money was scarce, like we didn't have that much. And so
Right,
it was how can we stretch it and make it more? And that was one way that we could stretch it and make it more was go someplace else and buy it cheaper and then take it into the theater.
right. Okay. So for Phil, it was autocratic and scarce.
How about you, Becca?
I think for me, it really was. you know, I was one of four kids, and we went camping every year because that was the only vacation we could all go on that we had enough money to go on. So it was also scarce. And also, we're going to get into this, but it was also, we don't talk about it. We never talked about money in my family, so I never understood whether it was really scarce or not. So when we think about this, so it comes not only from your upbringing, but as an adult, it also comes from other places. It comes from cultural beliefs. Like think about this, like certain cultures place different emphasis on saving or spending or generosity, or even like the wealth display. Are you allowed to talk about it? And your own community norms shape what you feel is normal. So, like, how many of you were raised with the mantra, never talk about religion, politics, or money in a social setting? I will come clean. That was our saying. Never talk about any of those three things. God forbid you ever talk about money publicly. So that was also being built into my money persona, right? Here's another thing that I think is really interesting. There's a study to show that people with better access to education typically report more confidence around money. So as an adult, the less financially literate you are, the more you're concerned about money. So if your parents were worried about money and you've never taken the time to teach yourself about money, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to have anxiety around money. But if your parents were open about it, if they taught you how to save and spend, if you taught yourself about money, there's a good chance you're not worried about money. So you see how all of this is intertwined. And let's not forget, by the way, the environment we live in, right? We are bombarded with subliminal marketing at all times. And liminal. I don't even know if that's a word, right? But we're bombarded with marketing at all times, right? How many of you constantly feel like, I just don't have enough, right? If I'm going to buy this, I don't have the money to buy a Rolex. Who has the money to buy a Rolex? Somebody who's super rich, right? But we're bombarded with messaging on a regular basis. So it's all super, super ingrained, right? Growing up, you were predisposed to think about money in a certain way. And as an adult, you are also influenced by how you think about money. So the next step in this process is, what is your story around money as an adult? Right? You can see the difference, right? We from Phil's perspective, right? It was autocratic and it was scarce, who is now a great financial planner who, I'm going to put words in your mouth, Phil, but I've heard you say it before, right? Money is a tool, right? Money is a tool to get you where you want to be. Totally different story around money. So, as an adult, I want you to think about right now, what is your story around money? Because some of these childhood things are hard to let go of, but you can let go of them. And it's really easy to start thinking about how to get educated. And so we're going to shift to Phil talking about how you actually get educated. And he's going to start with his model of what he does with people. And then he's going to shift to talking about what a financial advisor in general can do for you.
Thanks. And the other thing I just want to add, like to how you can change it as an adult, like if I say it was autocratic, like if I look at my house now, it's not autocratic at all. My wife and I make decisions jointly. I've sat with my kids and showed them, here's what we have. They have investment accounts of their own, and we talk about them and like they, it's nice if you get success, right? Because then that makes them more excited. But they've had some investments that are successful, and they enjoy following and knowing that. And one of my sons, when he started his job, as soon as he got his bonus check, he fully funded his Roth IRA. He didn't ask me about it.
Wow.
He just did it. But that's what happens when you have those conversations and there's education. And so it's a very different thing. And I've done this and asked that question in group settings. And most people, whether they've made that change or not, it's what they want to do. They want to get to where it's not the same as the way that it was growing up. That's a generational difference, but
Hmm.
that's where most people are moving towards.
Right.
So, as Becca said, this is my model. So you can see that it's designed to take you from a point of uncertainty and being unsure about money. So I use the word apprised the prize means informed. When you go through the whole process, at the end, you're more informed and you have a better understanding. And so we start with, before we even get to the money, unless you have urgent things to take care of, we start with working on a life plan. And that life plan is designed to help you identify those things that are the most important to you, that when you're making those choices as to how to use your money, you can then put it towards those things that have meaning to you and have value to. You know, I told my why story, and to the other part that to talk about is I've done my life plan too. And the first element of my life plan is to create a scholarship for women to go back to school like my mother did. And that realization that that was something that I had thought about it for a long time and forgotten about it came out during the life planning process. And so I've actually started that and I'm working towards that. So it's something that when I have enough funding for it to really happen, I can then go and enjoy it and see the benefits and see what comes from it. And that's a really wonderful thing to me to be able to do. But whatever your thing is, that's what the life planning is designed to help you figure out so that we can spend our money with more purpose and more intention. We can align it with how we want to live. And then from there, we want to create a plan of what to help you achieve that vision that we created in the life plan, help you invest your money so that it can hopefully grow. And also we want to follow through to make sure that those things that you want to do, you take the necessary steps to do them. And then once we've kind of gotten through that part, then it gets into where now it's an ongoing relationship. So we want to continue to talk and uncover the next steps. Because like when we do that initial vision, usually it's something we're going to try to do within the next 6 to 18 months. So that things can change, or there's more things that you want to add on top. So we want to make sure that we stay in touch, you know, and anybody that I work with is always welcome to reach out to me because there's questions that could come up at any time. And then just the idea that any plan that you put together, it needs to be updated, because I can make an argument that when you create a plan, as soon as you're done creating it, it's almost obsolete because not everything that you put into that plan is going to go exactly the way that you thought. So that's why you want to go back and make sure that you review and update and make sure that you're still staying on track. And if you're not, what has changed and how do we go back and modify so that now we can reflect those changes?
Yeah, Phil, the thing that comes up for me here is first that, it's that planning part in the beginning. It's not you just kind of taking the money and, oh, we're going to make the most money and we're going to stick it in all these stocks and we're going to do this the person loses control, right? It is a joint effort. And then also that it's a strategic financial plan, right? Everybody knows that you don't put a strategic plan and stick it on a shelf anymore, right? It's an ongoing moving target that you're constantly working on.
Absolutely right.
So tell us a little bit about, in general, what does a financial advisor do? How can they help?
So different financial advisors may do different things, right? But these are the things that I can do. We're talking about financial planning, we're talking about investment management. Those are kind of the basics, right? But I'm a CPA, and so I layer tax planning on top of it because to me, you're investing in your taxes. They're kind of joined at the hip. So you want to make sure that you've taken taxes into account when you're going through your investments and you're going through your planning because we don't want to pay more than our fair share. And it's a process where you have to think ahead. That's why it's planning, right? We don't want to just think about taxes when February comes and we get our 1099s and our W-2s or whatever it is that we get and we give them to our accountant to go file our return. I want to think about it on an ongoing basis because my view is it's not so much what we pay in any one single year. It's trying to make it so that we pay the least amount during our lifetime. And planning is what can help us do that.
And I
Then the
think I think that's something people forget, Phil, is that it's one thing to kind of put all your money away if you got a 401(k), blah, 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 but like at some point you're gonna have to pay taxes on that. So you need to
Yes.
kind of balance that portfolio to be tax advantage for you once you're actually spending the money you've been saving your whole life.
That's right. And that's why when people actually on it every year, I will look at whether or not it makes sense. Like if you've got all that money in that 401(k) that you didn't pay tax on, what's your tax bracket this year? Maybe it makes sense to do a Roth conversion or something like that and pay some tax on some of it now. So that it now goes into a bucket where it's now tax exempt. You don't ever have to worry about it again. Because again, that's part of thinking about that long-term
Right.
view on taxes instead of the short-term view. Uh, then obviously I mentioned the life planning. It I've had people come to me that need help with managing debt, and so we can put in some things to do that. And as I told you from my story, I experienced that, right? When I ended college, I had debt from credit cards, and I had to put in place a plan to get rid of it. And there wasn't an internet when I finished college to look at. Fortunately, I figured out one of the ways that what made the most sense to me is one of the two ways that they talk about paying down debt. It's about understanding your cash flow. Like, what are you taking in? What are you spending? And you want to make sure you have a surplus. And then when we have that surplus, what are we going to do with it? You can think about it in a 50-30-20 perspective. 50% of what you take in is going to go towards those things like your fixed expenses or the things that you need to live, like your house, paying your rent or paying your mortgage, paying for your car, paying for gas, paying for the food that you have in your house, not necessarily going out. Like that becomes a more of a variable thing. And that goes into that
So
30%
Phil,
bucket. Yes.
um, I think I took you down a rabbit hole. I'm sorry when
So
I
that's all right.
interrupted you.
That's okay.
So and I'll tell you kind of where my mind goes is, oh my gosh, right? I'm in overload already, right? So like, how do I know this? So I think the beauty of the financial planner and the financial advisor, right, is being able to take all of that and put it in English for you.
Yes. And like there's a lot of terms there, and I won't go into the rest of them, but we'll also talk a little bit about different ways to think about these things and what your knowledge level is
And
and
I
when you
think
need
the
help.
other thing that, because obviously I'm a huge proponent for people working with a financial advisor. For me personally, it's knowing that somebody besides me is taking all of this into consideration because I have no idea. Like that 50-30-20, like, really? Okay. I don't have time to pay attention to that, right? But somebody knowing that somebody else is paying attention to that and looking at all of it together just gives me that feeling, right? Like it's something I don't want to have to think about. So let's go into your common myths and mistakes. What do you see?
Well, I think the first thing a lot of people say is, I don't have, I don't know if I have enough money to work with a financial advisor. You have to think about what the benefits are too. If the answer, I could turn that around and say, if you almost always have enough, it's always about making decisions about what you're going to use your money for. And there's a lot of value that comes. It's not just the investing, it's all those other things that can put you in better shape. And so that on a net basis, you could end up better off by working with an advisor than not.
Yeah, can I ask you a question? Because I actually see two sides of this question. I see not only do I not have enough money to invest in working with a financial planner, like the cost of doing business with, to pay the financial planner, but also a lot of people say, I don't think I have enough money for a financial planner to play with. What would you say about that? Like, I don't have $8 million.
You don't have to. And that's like one of the reasons why when I work with people, there's two different ways that I can work with them. I can work with them on that traditional approach for the type of advisor I am, which is where you pay a percentage based upon what the assets are. Or we can work on a flat fee basis where you pay me the same amount every quarter, but it's not tied to your assets. Now I have a minimum that I want to work, that I want to work with somebody for, but you can pay in two different ways. And so for some people, it works better to have it based upon their assets. And for others, it works better to just agree on a fee and we pay that, you pay that fee every quarter.
Right. Good. Okay. Looks like the second one is the same one I get. We both get it.
Yeah. Yes, we do. Because again, it ties into that first. I don't know if I have enough, right? So I need the money that I have now, and I can't make changes because of my situation. I can't afford anything else. And then
Mm.
I think the last one, if somebody says to me, when's the best time to work with a financial planner? I'll say it's never too early. It's also never too late.
Mm. Interesting.
And so you can honestly, starting before you retire is better because it allows you to do more planning and think about more things and optimize your situation in a better way.
Yeah. I would love for you to go into your planning, your life planning part here.
Sure. So the life planning model, it's this is an acronym, it's evoke. And it starts with exploration, which is kind of a basic question. Why are you here? What made you decide to reach out and have this conversation? And there's some other questions that I ask as part of that process, but that's the basic thrust of it. This is all aimed at helping you live your most fulfilling life. And then we go into vision. And during vision, I ask you three questions. The first one's an easy one. It's kind of a design your life question. Imagine that money was no object. You could do anything you wanted. What would you do and how would you live your life? And you can dream big because, like I said, money's no object. And then it starts to get a little bit more serious because we get to the second question. This time you go to the doctor and you have he tells you you have 5 to 10 years left to live. The good news is you won't ever feel sick. The bad news is you don't know when you're going to go. Money is part of the equation now. And it's what would you do? How would you live your life? And what would you change? And then the third question is the hardest one of all, because this time you go to the doctor and you're told today's the day. Now it's not what would you do, although I will tell you some people have tried to answer it that way. It's what did you not get to do? And who did you not get to be? And the importance of asking this question is to help you identify those things that you can start doing now so that you get to the end of your life without those regrets because you didn't do those things that really matter to you. You can start to do them now. You can put in place a plan now, and then you live that a better life because you're able to do the things that really matter to you and have more purpose. And then after that, we get into obstacles, which is basically what can get in the way. And during that phase of the meeting, it's what are you going to do about that obstacle? How can you do that? Who can help you with it and help keep you accountable? And then when, because we're trying to create a little bit of urgency and get you motivated to go do those things. And it's this whole process, it's not me telling you what to do. It's me listening to you and having and helping facilitate your thought process as you figure it out. And when I do these conversations on Zoom, I talk less than 20% of the time. And that's my talking is mostly me answering asking questions because I'm letting you talk and you think it through. Then that K is the knowledge where I apply my knowledge as a advisor to help you put together that plan that'll let you achieve that vision, and then for you to go out and execute and follow through.
Awesome. I think that that is goes back to the whole like we're not just handing the money over to you. You're really taking advantage of what we want, right? You're taking a close look at what we want to do and designing it based on that.
Yes. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about creating alignment. And I like acronyms, so I have two more. So when I talk about alignment, I use the acronym TEAM. And if we think about our resources, we often think about money, but you can exchange money for time, right? Like I love to tell the story when I moved into the house that we're living now. The woman who owned the house before us, she had a tractor and she was cutting the grass. And I looked and I said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to buy the tractor from her. I'm going to cut the grass. I bought the tractor. I was doing it. The only good part of it was when I did it, my kids were little and they'd sit on the tractor with me, and that was kind of nice. But it was taking me over 3 hours and I wasn't finishing. My wife then found somebody that would cut the grass for $40 at the time. And I said, 3 hours of my time or $40. I know it's not going to take him 3 hours. I get that. But I know my time is worth way more than that. And I'm going to look at it, the $40 in the 3 hours. My time is worth way more than $13 an hour. I found somebody that to buy the tractor, so I got rid of it, and they looked and said, "I understand why you don't want it. It's not big enough." And I didn't even realize that. I guess I did as I went through the process. But you can exchange money for time. The other components beyond time or your energy and your attention. We want to try to align all those things with our values and what's most important to us. That's really the team concept, right? We have a team of resources that we want to align with our values. And then the other thing that I use in terms of if you want to work with an advisor or not is the concept of kit. And what kit means, like anybody can do what I do, but to do it well, you have to have the knowledge, and that requires time to gain that knowledge. You have to have the interest. And then what gets the hardest one of all is probably time, because you have to have the time to do it and do it well. So think about it. If you need to go to the doctor, you don't. try to operate on yourself. If you need surgery, you go to a doctor, somebody that's experienced. If you have a legal issue, you go to an attorney. If you, whatever you need, if there's an expert, finding that expert can really make the process a lot better for you.
You know what hits home for me as you're saying that, Phil, is it gives me when you say that, it like releases any guilt, I think maybe. I'm trying to name the emotion, but like I don't I honestly don't have an interest in this, right? And I don't have any knowledge of it. Like all of a sudden it's like I don't carry guilt. I don't carry a I should be able to how to do this, or I should, spend more time on it because I don't have the knowledge and I don't have the interest, right? So it kind of releases all of that pent up feeling about guilt around not doing it for myself, knowing that I can give it to somebody else who does have the knowledge and the interest. My God, I'd be bored out of my mind if I did what you did every day.
Well, that's why I have the life planning too, because that makes it a lot more fun and interesting, I will say
Yeah,
that.
right. Exactly. Well, I think this is really helpful because it's also that team piece is really sort of think about it. Like uh, also I feel like we're so kind of ingrained in like, we've got to save money, but really time is our only non-renewable resource, right? So if you're spending
Yes.
more time on something that, and giving that up because you're saving money, in some phases of your life that may be okay, but it's making that decision about it that's the most important thing, as opposed to just having it happen to you. So I would love for you to tell your story about this woman. This is a great story.
Okay. So I have this client, Linda, that we started working together. And right after I got home from the middle part of my life planning training, I got an email from her and she said, Phil, I've taken a leave of absence from work. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if I'm ever going to go back to work. I don't know what it means to my financial plan. I don't know what it means for anything, but I had to do it. And I started to email her back. And I said, no, this isn't the time for an email. So I called her and I asked her what was going on. And she told me a little bit about her situation. I knew she worked for a company that was a really high pressure job. I knew that she had a daughter that was starting college, but I didn't know that her daughter was going through some things in college. She'd be up until 1 or 2 in the morning talking to her and trying to help her. And the other daughter was in high school, and it's just a lot. And she's responsible for all the finances for the family. And I said to her, let's work on your life plan. So we did. And after we started it, my life plan is on my website because I figure if clients share with me, I'm good with sharing with them too. So it's right there. And she said, Phil, I read your life plan. Thank you. After reading it, I realized that I've been sitting here trying to build the biggest pile of money without thinking about what it means or how much. And from there, we worked on our life plan. Like just in, so like this couple, they each had two high paying jobs and they were living on one salary. So they had enough. I knew they did, but she didn't. We went through our life plan and now she's like a different person. But the reason the picture of Wrigley Field is there is because she told me a year after we started this life plan work that when she was a kid, she used to go to Cubs games and she'd sit there and they'd be sitting in the bleachers having a couple beers and she'd see these older women that were there like taking tickets or working as ushers and she said, I want to do that someday. And so now she's in her early 50s and she said, so Phil, I went on the Cubs website and I applied for a job. She goes, I go in there. I got an interview the next day. I go in. I'm wearing my Cubs World Series shirt. I'm wearing my Cubs jersey. There's all these kids there. They're going in that are nicely dressed. She goes, I got the job. And she loved it. And she didn't do it for the money. She because this is something she really wanted to do. And she's actually doing it again this year. And I know we're Facebook friends too. And I look on Facebook and like she'll post pictures of all the different things that she's doing there. She'll say, I'm going to be at such and such a part of Wrigley Field today. Come see me. But that's what the life plan did. It gave her the freedom to know that she could go and do the things that she wanted to do.
That's awesome. So let's shift gears to back to the people in the room and help them take this one step further. I think the most important question, Phil, that you ask people is this, right?
Yes. what's important about money to you? What's most important?
And I think if you think about this, really, this is, just give yourself a minute to think about it. Like, what does money buy you? What's important about having it? I think you can go back to my story, right? And the money piece was security at the time, right? What else do you hear, Phil, often when you do this question?
I mean, the two most common answers that I get to this question revolve around security and freedom. And we may have different ways that we define those words, but those are the two most common answers that I get.
Yeah. So take just a second and think about this. What's most important to you about money? And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put all of this together. Okay, all of the things that we've done so far. So first, what I want you to do is write down your old story around money. This is your story that you had growing up. And then I want you to think about how is this limiting you today? And so for those of you who actually want to go back to this exercise, when I get to the end, you can screenshot this page and it'll help you. The whole exercise will be there. But your story, how is that limiting you today? Right? What are you not doing because of this core belief that you have around money? And more importantly, is this old story true? Right? Oftentimes we tell ourselves a story that we started when we were six. Those neural pathways, right, have told us this story since we were 6, 7, 8 years old, but they don't serve us as an adult anymore. They're no longer true. So ask yourself, is that story still true? Then I want you to ask yourself, what could be possible if that's not true? Oh my gosh, turns out it's not true. Turns out that money is not scarce. Turns out that now that I'm 50, I actually have the income that and I've been able to save up a year's worth of money. I had thought that I hadn't gotten there, but if it's not true, what could be possible? Then we're going to shift gears and I want you to write down what's important to you about money, right? And I want you, just like Phil just said, sometimes that means different things to different people. So get very specific. What does that mean to you? What's important and what does it mean to you? Like if you say security is important to me, what does that mean? That means that I know that I have 3 months, 6 months, a year. It means that I know that I can pay for have a 529 so that my child can go to college without loans. What does that actually mean to you? And then how do you know that you have that today? And I ask this because a lot of times when you're stuck somewhere, what you're stuck in is actually still feeding you in some way, right? You're stuck. So how do you, if you think that you can't leave your job because you're making X amount of money and you can't possibly leave your job, right? You believe that that is giving you some sort of security, some sort of something. So how do you know when you say the most important thing to me is security? How do you know that you currently have that security? What are the measures that you're looking at? And if you knew you had those things regardless. So for example, if you then went to a financial planner and the financial planner said, oh, actually, I know that you're completely secure regardless of what you do, what would change? One last step on this perspective, right? So now that you know how your old story is limiting you and what's truly important to you, what will you change today about your core belief? So again, I went through that pretty quickly. Go ahead and do a screenshot of this so you can take it with you and work on it later. So Phil, if you can just tell a quick story on the mortgage piece, that would be helpful. I'm cognizant
Sure.
of time too, so
So I have a couple that I work with, and when we're going through these exercises, I ask what's most important to you about money to you, and what are your early money memories? His story revolves around when he was growing up. His family had lived in a house, and then they moved to another house. When they had the first house, they kept it after that when they moved. And then when they were in the second house, his father lost his job and they moved back to that first house. And the only reason they were able to survive when the father lost the job was because they had this house to go back to. So now, even still at this point in life, he wants to pay off the mortgage that he and his wife have on their home. And she is a financial person and looks at the interest rate and says, we're only paying 3%. Why would I want to pay this off quickly? But he wants to pay it off because he knows that if anything happens, right? This is what he grew up with. If anything happens, he knows that the house is there. He actually wants to take it further and like have a farm that they can live off the land and all those things. But that's where it is. It all comes from that childhood experience.
Which I think is so interesting too, because did you get the screen share back?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's really interesting because especially around if you have a low mortgage rate, everybody kind of assumes that, there for that person, there's a bit of security in there too, just seeing security in a different way, right?
Yes.
So here's again what we know, right? And I think it's this. There's a simple truth, right? Money doesn't have to control you. And I think that for a lot of my clients, money does control them, but it doesn't have to. As Phil says, it's a tool, right? You can use money as a tool to get you where you want to go with the right people, the right analysis, and the right ability for you to figure out what's really important to you. It becomes a tool to help you live the life that you actually want to live. So when I think about this and I think about going back to the model of change, right? Each of you is here because you're thinking about, okay, how can I change my vision of finances so that I can change my life and do what I want to do, right? Somewhere in this model, money is holding you back, right? It's either you, for some people, I got to wait and get a bonus or whatever the case may be. I am scared about losing the money I'm making, or I'm going to retire and I don't know where my money is going to come from. Somewhere in this model, you're stuck because of finances. So, based on what we did today, my question to you is what's the smallest first step that you can take to shift your mindset? We did a little of that today, but what's the first step that you will commit to help you truly understand your finances so that you can begin to live the life that you want to live? Go ahead and write down the smallest baby step that you can take. And I want you to imagine something. We are super close to the end, and I want you to do one last exercise for me. I want you to start thinking about this, right? For years, right? You may be in a situation where you are in unfortunate awareness. You know that you are unhappy and you want to make a change. Imagine now that it's 2027, right? 2 years from now, and your life is finally where you want it to be. Did we lose screen share again? Okay.
Okay.
Your life is finally where you want it to be. Like you're on the path you want to be on. You're working at the Cubs. You're doing anything that you actually want to do. You are not stuck in that cubicle anymore. You've gone back to school to do what you want to do. Insert whatever it is, but you are confident knowing that you're on the path that you want to be on and you are financially sound and you have zero regrets. You're happy with what you're doing with your life, and you're so happy that like it shows up in every facet of your life. Your kids are happier, your spouse is happier. You don't get upset when your parents call you. Like there is just you're in a totally different space because you've been able to take that change, take that step because you've had the right people beside you. Here's the thing. This is what Phil and I do. We help people make that change, right? So I, as an executive and personal executive coach, help people not only figure out what that is, because a lot of times people don't know what that is, what that change is, but help them to create the plan to get there. And I always say you've got to work with a financial advisor during this process because there's no way to move forward without working with a financial advisor. So if this is something that has spoken to you, right? If Phil's life planning, Phil's process, understanding the way that he does financial advising, and and I have spoken to you, no pun intended, not literally, because I am literally talking to you. Um, we invite you to work with us, right? So if you are exhausted, afraid that maybe you're going to live to regret not making a change, because by the way, most regrets are not doing something, right? If you're feeling stuck because you think you need to make the money you're making now, but you don't actually know, if you're finally ready to live the life that fulfills you and feeds your soul, I promise you it can happen. And if you're willing to invest in your change, again, we invite you to work with us. Here are the QR codes for you to set up times to talk to us. We're going to open it up for questions in a second, but I just want to close it out. Both of us just want to close it out. Listen, I do what I do because I know there's more to life than title, career, and stature, right? I had all of those things and I fell more than once. And I came back. I am living proof that you can be spit up, chewed up, spit out, and come out happier, right? I'm living proof that you can go from the breadwinner, quit your job, invest in yourself, and find a passion that leads your life, right? I live a life now where I work 6 hours a day. I walk my dog for an hour in the middle of the day. I haven't seen the inside of a cubicle in years, right? I am living the life that I want to live, helping people change their lives. It's why I do what I do. I have a two-part personal mission. The first one is to help as many people as possible change their lives and live the life that they want. And the second is to touch at least 10,000 people with at least one tiny tidbit of information that they take away that changes the way they think today. So I hope I was able to do that for you today. Phil?
And I could repeat a lot of what you just said, Becca, because I think there's so many similarities in terms of what we're trying to do. But if I'm boiling it down, look, I told you my story. That's a big part of why I do what I do. But I also intentionally named my firm a prize wealth management because a prize means to inform. And when it comes to finances and education around finances, I know that it's lacking. It's not easy to get. And so it's important to me to help provide education. And I'm trying to do that beyond just what I can do with my clients because I can't touch everybody's life. I can't have everybody as a client, nor would I want to. But I'm helping to teach life planning. And I'm trying to go into schools to help with financial education because if I can do that, I can touch more lives. And those people that I help can touch more lives so that it can have a cascading effect. But a lot of this is, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this is just, it's really important to help others.
Right. Yeah. So thank you for joining us today. I'm going to open it up for questions. Anza, let me know if we have any in the chat. I can't actually see the chat.
Well, I know there was a question from Sally, so I'll address that one because I did
Okay.
see that one. So, Sally, how do you choose an advisor? Honestly, it's a really personal choice. You have to find somebody that you're comfortable with, with working with. You have to believe in their approach and how they do things. If you're looking for somebody with your finances, to me, you want to make sure they're a fiduciary, which means if there's somebody that works in your best interests and makes recommendations in your best interest, and that's honestly part of why I do life planning because then I know what your best interests are because we've gone through that process. But it's all about finding somebody that you're comfortable with, that you can have, because this becomes a deeply personal relationship. And so you want to make sure that this is somebody that you're comfortable talking with and sharing things with. And like I said, you like their approach and you're comfortable with that and make sure that they have real credentials because there's lots of advisors out there that don't have any credentials to speak of.
And I would add to that too, like they speak to you. Apparently, I'm using that term a lot. But if you need it in English, they're speaking to you in English. If they want it in financial terms, they're speaking in financial terms, that they understand how to deliver the information to you in the best way that you can consume it. Thank you for joining us today. We hope it was helpful. If you have any questions in the future, please feel free to reach out and take care.